First G is, I call, the challenge of good governance. Believe me, for any society to succeed and do well, it has to have good governance. And here, fortunately, sometimes by luck, many Asian societies are benefiting from good governance. And one of the most surprising facts you will ever discover is that if you're looking for quality of brain power in a government, now, let me give the big secret away. Number one country in the world is probably Singapore. That's a secret. But the second country that's amazing, this is China. So the Chinese Communist Party, which is still running China today, right, after 60 years, has done an incredible job of meritocracy. And you know, if you want to understand why organizations succeed, why is McKinsey such a great consulting firm? Why is Goldman Sachs so successful? Why is Harvard University the best university in the world? Very simple. You find the best brains, you collect the best brains in your organization, and you become the best. And the Chinese Communist Party today has become the most meritocratic political party in the world. And that is an enormous asset that China has. But China also, by the way, at the same time, faces a major challenge. The Communist Party cannot keep on running China forever. It has to transform its political system. It has to eventually become democratic. It won't happen tomorrow. May not happen 10, 20, 30 years from now. But it has to happen at some point in time. So that's a major challenge that China faces. And many of the Asian countries, by the way, cannot afford to be complacent. Because if you turn on your TV set, if you turn on BBC today, you turn on CNN, you can see what's happening in Thailand. In Thailand, you see a major power struggle going on between the established power structures in Bangkok and the newly emerging political forces. So many Asian countries will face similar challenges like the one faced in Thailand. So there will be challenges for the Asian states, and this will be the challenges of achieving good governance. The second G I describe as geopolitics. And the reason why geopolitics is important is because geopolitics has been around for thousands of years. And throughout history, the most important determining force in geopolitics is the relations between the world's greatest power and the world's greatest emerging power. The world's greatest power today is the United States of America. The world's greatest emerging power today is China. And by the logic of history, as these two powers jostle with each other, you should be seeing now rising levels of tension between US and China. Instead, we are seeing the exact opposite. You know, George W. Bush used to say relations between US and China have never been better. President Obama and Secretary Hillary Clinton also say relations between US and China have never been better. How come? This is not supposed to be what's happening in history. Now, why it's happening is a complicated story. It has to do with the fact that the level of geopolitical competence in China is amazing. Right? I have an index of geopolitical competence in my book on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest. I give the former Soviet Union a 2, because it lost an empire without firing a shot. That's geopolitical incompetence. I give the European Union a 4 because the European Union manages its internal problems very well, manages problems outside Europe very badly. I give United States 6 or 7 because it is still the most geopolitically powerful country in the world. And I give China 8 or 9 because China is performing a geopolitical miracle by emerging so powerfully without alarming the world's greatest power. And if you study this, you'll realize that this is quite amazing, that's what's happening. But at some point in time, the tensions may come. And if and when they do, that will be a big challenge for us. So what's the final G that we have to worry about? I call it global governance. Now, global governance is one of the most boring terms in the world. But it's also one of the most important terms in the world, because if you want to understand why the gold trade is global, right? The gold travels all the way around the world. How does it travel around the world? On the basis of a rules-based order that was created in 1945. And the reason why that rules-based order is important is because before 1945, when countries wanted to emerge as great powers, when Japan and Germany wanted to emerge before World War II, and they wanted to get resources, the only way they could get resources was to go out and conquer. That's why Japan conquered Southeast Asia, to get resources. But after 1945, when the rules-based order emerged, Japan and Germany once again became great powers, but instead of conquering other countries to get resources, they could buy. There was a rules-based order. They could go and buy all the gold or the silver or the oil around the world. Now, this rules-based order was a gift from United States and Europe to the world. And the reason why United States and Europe created this rules-based order in 1945 was because they were absolutely convinced that if you had a rules-based order and you had liberal rules of international trade, United States and Europe would be the biggest beneficiaries of this rules-based order. Now we have, and that's why United States and Europe were the main custodians of this rules-based order. If you are benefiting, you want to be the custodian. But now, the biggest global contradiction that we face in this area is that the custodians of the rules-based order no longer see themselves as the beneficiaries. And the beneficiaries, the new powers in Asia, China and India and all that, are not yet ready to become the custodians. So the question is, who's going to maintain this rules-based order? And this is not an abstract question. If you want to understand why is it for the first time since the creation of GATT, all the previous trading rounds have succeeded. Tokyo round, Uruguay round, but now, for the first time, the Doha round is about to fail. Why? Because the custodians no longer have faith that trade liberalization will benefit them. And if you want to understand why Copenhagen failed, very simple. Once again, who's going to be the custodians of these rules? And how do you ensure an equitable division of labor between Europe, United States, and China and India? It's very difficult. So there is very large global questions that have emerged as a result of the return of Asia, and there are many global challenges. So what I'm confident, what I'm optimistic, that the future we have is a great one. I also want to tell you, and I know you like to hear this because in your business you're equally interested in risks as you are in opportunities. There are major risks out there. And if you have good questions about the risks, I'll be happy to answer them now. Thank you very much.
Tengo en esta sesión de preguntas una y dos más que son más o menos lo mismo. Voy a hacer primero una que es el pasado. ¿Cuáles son los límites del libre mercado? ¿Hasta dónde debe la sociedad regular los mercados? Por ejemplo, la última crisis originada por la falta de regulación de los créditos hipotecarios. Okay. Esta, just a moment. No, está bien. That's okay. Please, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I must say that's an excellent question. And it's a question that captures the central challenge of our times. Because we have actually, when I mentioned about the 10,000% rate of growth in Asia, the image I have is of history going on fast forward, things changing very fast. And believe me, I must emphasize one point, that the developments of the last 2-3 years have been happening so fast and have been so huge that most people still don't understand what's going on. But some clear lessons are emerging. And one of the big lessons is that free market economics has to be regulated. And indeed, many Asian countries feel very vindicated by what has happened in the last few years, because I don't know whether you remember this. In 1997, 1998, Asians went through a major financial crisis. Thailand went down, Indonesia went down, Malaysia went down, South Korea went down, right? Big crisis. And at the time, Time magazine came out with a cover story saying, this is how America ran the world in 1997. It's very powerful. 10 years later, the most powerful country in the world ended up with lots of problems. And you know why? Because the United States of America became a victim of an ideology. And what was the ideology? That ideology was best captured in Ronald Reagan's famous statement. When somebody asked him, what can government do to solve problems? Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution. Government is the problem. And therefore, in the Reagan-Thatcher era, the Western societies began to deregulate very fast. They didn't want to control the markets and let the markets run riot. And therefore, you had this huge crisis. By contrast, fortunately, the Asian countries believed that to succeed in a society, you must have the invisible hand, Adam Smith's famous invisible hand of free markets, and you must have the visible hand of good governance. Now the West gave up the belief in good governance. The Asians did not. And so as a result of this, after this great financial crisis, the Asian countries realized, hey, we did the right thing. We didn't deregulate that fast. And for example, many countries were asked to liberalize their capital market